Israel can then look towards that longer future. Those aspects are interactive, and we talk with our Israeli partners every day about the importance of civilian harm mitigation and avoiding civilian harm, not only on the moral merits, and not only because it's consistent with international law, but because it's in Israel's interest to create that diplomatic.
Sorry, I'm a little tight on time. I have one question for General Langley. I want to get General Kurilla a chance to respond as well. Go ahead.
What my Arab partners tell me is just that there has to be a viable process and a path to a two-state solution, is where they would see being able to come back to the table on some type of normalization.
Yeah, thank you. And General Langley, one of the worst wars and worst humanitarian crisis is going on right now that nobody's really talking about, and that's the war in Sudan. Can you talk to us a little? Is there any prospect of that war slowing down, coming to an end? What is our role in working with partners in the region? Because that is a humanitarian crisis that quite frankly rivals Gaza right now, and nobody seems to be discussing it. What should we be doing about it? What is the future?
Ranking Member, Sudan is still in the consequence right now with Burhan and Hemedti, and back in 15 April 2023 was a problem. I know that we've engaged whole of government with the State Department going in Jeddah and trying to get those parties together to solve it, but it hasn't worked. So we're still keeping engagements globally, whereas other leaders are going. But I'll just tell you, especially the RSF, Hemedti, his forces are backed by some, I'll just say, egregious members on the globe that are pushing for their own great power competition goals in that country for access. And I'm talking about the Russian Federation. They would love a warm water port. They'd love to have the port there in Sudan as their own. That's against our global campaign plans. I can talk with a higher level of specificity in closed session, but that is a concern.
So, thank you. And just quickly, General Kurilla, Afghanistan. It's interesting, Pakistan is becoming more concerned about the Taliban. What is the potential for partnerships there to try to help us keep an eye on the Taliban and ISIS and whatever else is going on in Afghanistan? I apologize, you've got 25 seconds.
Congressman, so I literally talked to the Chief of the Army Staff from Pakistan this morning in a regular scheduled call. They have tremendous insight into the violent extremist organizations inside of Afghanistan, and I think there's tremendous opportunity to be able to partner with Pakistan on that.
Great, thank you. That's what I want to yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank each of you for your service. I really would like to begin today by paying tribute to the 3 Army reservists from Georgia who were killed just 7 weeks ago, murdered by Hezbollah, a puppet of Iran. And you've already recognized Tower 22. But 3 young people who should be remembered, Kennedy Sanders, William Rivers, and Breonna Moffett. They were killed, and additionally, there were a number of troops who were injured. And Madam Secretary, I have sent a letter to Secretary Austin for an accounting of how many were injured. What are the conditions? The American people need to know this, because the puppets of Iran have every intent to fulfill their goal of death to Israel, death to America. I also want to point out that it is bipartisan, and I agree with the ranking member that we have global interconnectivity. The interconnectivity is a war we did not choose, and that is dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. It began on August 22nd, 2022, February 22nd, 2022, with war criminal Putin invading Ukraine. Then October 7th, the puppets of Iran invading Israel. And I think, sadly, much of this relates to the weakness that was shown of the appeasement by Mr. Biden in Afghanistan. 13 young Marines killed at Abbey Gate. And then I was really grateful this week with General Mark Milley and General Frank McKenzie. It was clearly identified that the decision to abandon Afghanistan was solely by Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden on August 26, 2021, blamed the military. Said he had letters. That's not accurate. And indeed, it was his decision which has led to the weakness around the world and the incredible situations of instability all over the world. With that in mind, Dr. Secretary, in your testimony, you mentioned the retaliatory strikes of American forces carried out on targets in Iraq and Syria after the attack on Tower 22. It's been reported that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard instructors returned home to Iran once America announced the warning of our incoming strikes. Madam Secretary, the purpose of the retaliatory strikes should be to hold Iran and their puppets accountable for the act of violence, de-escalate the threat they pose, and defer further attacks on U.S. service members and our allied partners. But giving notice, to me, is utterly irresponsible, and it actually underscores weakness. What is the purpose of giving notice?
Thank you, Congressman. My understanding is the notice that was given is to our Iraqi partners, to who we owe that as part of our partnership, as part of our strong relationship, and as a matter of respecting their sovereignty.
Well, I just find it totally irresponsible, and really it relates also back again to the Houthi attacks, over 150 on American personnel in the past couple of months, and there's been really no response. And they should be alerted. We know trajectory today. We knew trajectory 150 years ago, where the launch sites were. They should be notified now that there would be an immediate response and not given notice, and this is just so irresponsible. Equally, to me, General Kurilla, it's shocking to me that we have Iranian oil exports which are being used to finance the killing of Americans around the world. Are there any sanctions to stop these exports?
All of the Iranian oil is sanctioned right now, Congressman.
And it's sanctioned. Are there waivers? How does this occur? That there would be sales to China, to the Chinese Communist Party? Let's get real. And then additionally, we have incredible and unfortunate and irresponsible sales and exports from war criminal Putin to the world's largest democracy, India, which is inexcusable. And so what are the sanctions being waived?
they're not being waived, Congressman. What's happening is Iran is evading those sanctions by using an entire ghost fleet called a dark fleet of ships to be able to go out and do ship-to-ship transfers and using other methods to bypass those to get the oil where 90% of it goes to China.
And I appreciate you say China. It's the Chinese Communist Party, and they have every intent of world domination, and we should be making every intent to protect the American people and Western civilization. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wallander, on February 13th, the U.S. Senate voted 78-22 to approve a national security package, which, among other things, included help for Israel to replenish its Iron Dome program, funding for Ukraine, and funding for humanitarian assistance. When we talk about Iran's malign behavior, I think one of the most obvious manifestations is the fact that they've now become a major weapon supplier to Russia in the war in Ukraine. And actually, one of the reasons why Ukraine is in such desperate straits right now is because of the torrent of drones that, again, are being used by Russian forces to weaken the front line. Can you just, again, for a moment, just reiterate about why the U.S. House now has had 5 weeks to take up the Senate-passed package and why it's so desperately important? And it has a spillover effect into CENTCOM in terms of trying to get that measure through.
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, one of the global aspects to the challenges that the United States and DoD in particular face is that there is this relationship between Russia and Iran, and they are enabling one another's development of new technologies, adaptations of tactics, of the use especially of UAVs, but also the capabilities on the battlefield. And so we are in a competition with helping our partners stay ahead of both the technical capabilities, the platforms, and adapting to the growing cooperation between Russia and Iran on tactics. And we have long warned that the relationship between Russia and Iran, which is enabling Russia in Ukraine, is threatening our partners in the region, and we are seeing that with the ability that the Houthis have to threaten and actually attack shipping, among other capabilities that threaten our partners in the region.
Thank you. I mean, again, it's blindingly obvious. If people are sincere about trying to stop the malign influence of Iran, we should pass this supplemental package tonight and get it to the president's desk. General Kurilla, a few weeks ago, the U.S. Army vessel General Frank Besson departed Virginia to the Mediterranean, where they're now setting up a sea pathway to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Can you talk a little bit about just what steps are being taken to ensure safe transport and how this whole pier construction process is going to take place? I think it's an extraordinary effort. It's not a substitute for land access for humanitarian assistance, but again, I think it's a great example of the Army stepping up.
Sure, Congressman. What it is it's a joint logistics over the shore. It's coming out of the 7th Transportation Brigade Expeditionary. When I commanded the 82nd Airborne Division, it was one of my subordinate units. And what they're going to do is set up a floating pier out at sea and then a trident pier, which basically comes off of the beach to be able to transition humanitarian aid from Cyprus out to the floating pier and then take it by these Army watercraft onto the pier and then push it into a marshaling yard and then for onward distribution. Right now, the 5 of the ships have departed, and the large medium-speed roll-on, roll-off, the Benavides, was actually supposed to depart at 10:00 this morning. It finished loading up about 3 this morning, and that'll be heading across, and all of that should be arriving in the theater in the first couple of weeks of April.
In terms of safety, for the crew, and also who's going to be at the receiving end when this actually makes it to the beach, can you talk about that?
Yeah, force protection is one of my top priorities, and right now my deputy commander and much of my staff is currently in the region in multiple countries as they work out the fine details of this.
Thank you. And again, Dr. Wallander, the humanitarian component of the security package, again, it's a global humanitarian assistance. I mean, obviously Gaza is in dire need for assistance, but also it's in General Langley's sphere as well in terms of the Sudan, as far as getting humanitarian assistance into that region. And can you talk about how that helps us in terms of U.S. presence and a positive posture?
Well, we have a moral imperative as well, but yes, there is a strategic element of this, which is that to lay the groundwork for a peaceful resolution, once Israel has defeated Hamas, we need to be sure that we have the relationship and we have supported the civilians, the people of Gaza who require that humanitarian assistance. And same element, the value proposition in Sudan of the United States being there has to be supported by Congress.
I thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurilla, and thank you all for being here today. General, you spoke eloquently about Iran using its proxies in your AOR. Many of us believe that Iran will continue to use its proxies to attack us, our allies, and our friends, unless and until we take direct and forceful action against Iran. There are many ways that this could take place. I have no prescription on what that should look like. Shouldn't we be more forceful against Iran directly?
Congressman, thank you for the question. As the combatant commander, I provide options. Those include everything from cyber to kinetic, and identify the risks associated with those options, and then the policymakers and the president make a decision on which options to choose. I would tell you that when we look at actions that we have taken, for instance, in Iraq and Syria, on our last strike that we did, we hit 85 targets. We killed the commander of Kataib Hezbollah, who was responsible for all Kataib Hezbollah inside of Syria. We killed Abu Taqwa, the head of Harakat al-Nujaba, one of the Iranian Lime militia group's operational commanders. And what that did is that caused them to pause, and a period of deterrence has been established in Iraq and Syria. We're on day 46 right now, but I would tell you all deterrence is temporal. But I do believe there has to be cost imposition on Iran for them to be able to cease their malign behavior.
Well, thank you, and I hope, Secretary Wallander, that you take a message back to the White House that we need to show more backbone against Iran. I'm going to shift gears here, General Kurilla, and ask you about directed energy and with the engagements that are coming against the Houthi attacks. Many are arguing, and I would agree, that we are on the wrong side of the cost curve, and that the cost per shot is unsustainable. And what's even more important is that we're depleting precision munitions that may be needed in the future for another fight or for ourselves somehow. So what is the utility of directed energy, and why aren't we doing more to use what we do have? I know it's not perfected yet, but it has great capabilities against drones and things like that. Currently, why aren't we doing more in the Red Sea?
It does, Congressman, and what we also need to look at, not just directed energy, is high-powered microwave to be able to go after drone swarms. We do have, the Army is losing its transformation in contact. They've given us 3 50-kilowatt lasers that are striker-based that we have inside of Iraq right now. We are experimenting with those and the best and most effective way to use those to help them learn from that to be able to make better systems. I encourage the Navy to employ directed energy systems. I know there is at least one destroyer, the Preble, I believe, that has a 60-kilowatt Helios. We would welcome being able to bring systems in, but directed energy is not the panacea. It'll be part of a layered defense, and we have to be able to get further out with it to be able to bring down these systems when it's only costing $1 a shot minus acquisition to be able to do that. But I would tell you what's worse than shooting $1 million missile at a $20,000 drone is that $20,000 drone hitting a $2 billion ship with 300 sailors on it. And I think our Navy is performing marvelously right now.
Well, I think I have to agree with everything that you've just said. Please lean on the Navy to use the Preble, and we can continue to make advances in what we learn operationally under the strain of these attacks, under the stress of the attacks. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I would ask that you really use more of directed energy and high-powered microwaves because there's a capability there that we've been testing but not really using operationally, and we need to start doing that. I'd hate to see a repeat of Tower 22, for instance.
Yeah, Congressman, what I tell all the services, give me systems, we will experiment with it. We'll tell you if it works in a real-life environment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, just sort of off topic here, but it's been talked about the pullout from Afghanistan. It would be good for all of us to review the total history and time frame for the pullout from Afghanistan, recognizing that the previous administration set a specific date in early March to be out of Afghanistan. The Biden administration extended that by over 6 months. So moving on, my question really goes to General Langley and the work that you're doing in Africa. That is specific interest to me since my wife and I were Peace Corps volunteers there many, many years ago. You speak of the whole of government. Please describe in as much detail as possible what you mean by the whole of government, and use the example of the whole of government in the eastern part of Africa. What is it? What is necessary? And then how the military would participate in that.
Congressman, thanks for that question. As we are in a competition environment at the strategic level, we compete with PRC and Russia in their offerings of offering the bright shining objects, if you will, to our African partners. But collectively, with our whole of government approach, with USAID and State Department and what they bring together, when we do the Africa campaign plan of OAIs, which are the operations, activities, and investments, a good portion of that is across the interagency. So as far as assurance actions, I would just say, give you a good example of the President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed in Somalia. As his operations were going in the Haran region, he used his clearing forces that we trained to be able to achieve objectives. And then by happenstance, USAID, as a result of the floods and desertification and the drought, came in and provided. Those clans out there in the central region of Somalia turned. That was how the playbook actually works with the whole of government. That's just a clear example. I have numerous examples down in the southern piece of Africa as well, time permitting.
So it's a combination of USAID and the State Department. Are there sufficient resources for those two entities to meet the goals of your operational plan?
Congressman, no, there isn't. What State Department does and what USAID does, just the way the budgets are structured, they don't have much flexibility outside of humanitarian assistance. They need to have the flexibility to take these budgets and reorient money at the time and the point of consequence. If they had that, we would really be more effective in our campaign plans.
I think it's important for the committee. We tend to focus on the military piece of this. Is it true that the military piece of the Africa strategies to success, the military is small compared to the other whole of government participants?
It is, Congressman. You know, but with modest investment, we're getting asymmetric, synergistic effects with our asymmetric approach of being able to codify all of the activities and investments across the interagency and across the departments to metastasize into a whole of government effects, desired effects that protect U.S. interests and also protect the homeland.
Aside from the Wagner Group, are the militaries of China and Russia directly involved in Africa?
Yes, Congressman, I'll start with the most pressing, immediate, acute threat right now across the Sahel. I would say some of the activities, layered threats that we have across the Sahel are actually fueled by the Russian Federation. And I say this because, given the demise of beginning Prigozhin, we thought that the Wagner Group was going to demise on the continent, but it's gone in another direction because now they're sponsored by the MOD of the Russian Federation. That's a concern.
And I would note that the migration from that Sahel is a major challenge for our allies in Europe as well as in the northern African countries. With that, I yield back. Thank you very much, General.
I thank the gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. General Carrillo, I want to begin with you. Just a few short years ago, the Army says, hey, we're getting rid of our watercraft. We're divesting. Guess what? Today, the 7th Transportation Brigade out of Joint Base Langley Eustis is spinning up. Guess where they're going? To Gaza. Joint logistics over the shore. They're going to be there. Sounds like to me there's a little bit of contradiction there. Anyway, very difficult mission. It'll take them a little less than a month to get there. Once they're in CENTCOM, I think they're going to be at extraordinary risk because they're going to be targeted. Hamas, the Houthis, Iran-backed terrorist groups in the region. I think there's going to be extraordinary risk with them focusing on that job. First question, how are you going to protect those forces? How are you going to make sure that they are not in the headlines, unfortunately, weeks after, by being targeted by those groups? How are they going to do their job while they're looking over their shoulder? How is that going to happen? I want to know what the long-term plan is for that. Second of all is, how do you sustain protecting that pier? So once it's constructed, then all of a sudden you have to look at it and say, well, it's great to have that pier to have the logistics. How do you protect that in the long run? So how do you protect now, and then how do you protect in the future?
Congressman, force protection is a top priority for this. My deputy commander, like I said, is already in the region working with our regional partners over there in a classified setting. I can talk to you specifically about the force protection measures that will be there with our partners as well.
You know, they're going to be under continual operations there. So once the pier is constructed, they're going to be offloading. We know as we speak today, Army personnel, Navy personnel, civilian personnel, working 24 hours a day at the Port of Virginia to put together the necessary pieces to be able to go there into theater and to be able to construct this infrastructure. It's interesting to me that we say that there are going to be no boots on the ground in Gaza. Can you tell me how you physically make that happen? Because my understanding is a pier actually connects to shore. There will be some construction activities on shore. Tell me, are personnel going to levitate? How are they not going to go from the water to the shore and have boots on the ground in Gaza?
Again, Congressman, like I said, I used to command, they used to be one of my subordinate units. I'm very familiar with how the 7th Transportation and Joint Logistics over the shore does this. We are working with our partners in the region that will assist with this, and I can talk to you in a classified setting exactly how this will operate.
So you're very confident there'll be no U.S. personnel with boots on the ground there?
There's no plan to put boots on the ground.
Okay. We look at this in the longer term. Obviously, this is going to be at risk in that particular area. Give me a little more idea about what the cost will be for us to continue to protect that facility. What's going to happen? We're going to have civilian ships there coming in with cargo. Obviously, they're going to be targets. What's the plan, not just to protect the facility there on shore, but what's the plan to protect the civilian ships that come in and offload that cargo?
There will be protection for them, Congressman, that I can talk about in a classified setting and tell you exactly how that'll work.
And you're confident that we will be able to protect against all threats?
Force protection is a top priority for me, Congressman.
Gotcha. Very good. General Carrillo, I know that you talked about the threats posed by the Houthi in the Red Sea. You know, we see a number of different assets that they're putting in our direction, whether it's drones, loitering munitions. I understand the effort to have to protect our men and women on those ships, to protect our assets. But is it a sustainable long-term strategy to use million-dollar munitions to shoot down drones and loitering munitions that are $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a piece?
Congressman, what's worse than that is that $20,000.
I understand. I didn't ask you today. Listen, I'm not questioning at all whether we should protect our sailors, our soldiers, our Marines, our airmen, and our Coast Guardsmen. Top job. Is it sustainable to continue to use those costly munitions against the price of these threats?
What we need is for Iran to quit supplying the Houthis.
I know.
Right back.
Listen, you're great at talking around the question. My question is it sustainable? Is it sustainable to use that level of weaponry against the level of weaponry that's being used?
If we can degrade that capability on ground where they're shooting it from, we can be. And what we need is the services to create more cost-effective, where it has the same probability of kill on these munitions. I welcome directed energy. I welcome high-powered microwave.
So you'd be fully in favor of the Army doing everything they can to get into the counter-UAS business?
I'm all about counter-UAS, and if we pass the supplemental, there's $686 million for counter-UAS in that, which will save lives.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick fact check. General Langley, just quickly, there's a historic relationship with the then USSR and the African countries that sustained itself in terms of their equipment supply. So wouldn't you say that that foundation is historic in nature as well? Just a simple yes or no.
Yes, it is historic.
Well, thank you. So to say this all occurred in the last 2 years isn't factual. Secondly, Dr. Wallner, is Iraq important to us as a linchpin to our ability to provide security and economic benefit in the Middle East?
Iraq is absolutely vital to the ability to ensure the enduring feat of ISIL.
So us conducting a military strike on Iraq, on their sovereign territory, without telling them, would have been endangering that to some degree. So it was good that we notified Iraq.
We are in Iraq at the agreement of the Iraqi government.
All right, thank you. I just want to deal with that. We've talked here, and it's one of the most critical things, underpinnings, about this relationship with